Hello and welcome. Today I'm up here in Wenatchee State Park out near Leavenworth, Washington, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about whether it's better to have an integrated electric system in your van build or whether it's better to have a modular electric system in your van build. So first off, the difference between an integrated system and a modular system is an integrated system basically is installed as part of the van. It's usually put underneath paneling in the walls of the van or ceiling, something like that. The lights are usually built in, you operate all the lights with switches, and you have outlets to power your devices. Batteries are usually separate and installed somewhere safe. They're usually larger capacity batteries, and oftentimes you have solar panels on the roof. Sometimes you have some sort of way to charge it with the engine's alternators. So there's usually some sort of switch, whether it's automated or not, just depends on the build. So that's what an integrated system would be. A modular system is where you have things like rechargeable lights, a rechargeable battery power bank, something like a Jackery or my Rock Pals here. That is usually connected to a solar panel that can pull out or is otherwise portable. You can put it outside the vehicle, and quite often you just charge up your power station through just the usual 12-volt power port in the dashboard of your car. So there's a lot of good reasons to go for systems in either direction, and I just want to explain a few of the main differences between the two types of systems, and you can decide for yourself exactly which one works better for you. And also keep in mind that you can do combinations of these two types of systems. So first off, let's talk about the benefits of using an integrated system. So when it's working properly, integrated systems are the most seamless. They're more like what you are accustomed to in a normal household. So there really isn't much of a learning curve to actually using the system. You don't really have to think about it as much. It's just always on, it's always there, and it's just kind of running in the background. So if you have really large power requirements, like you are trying to run an induction stove or something like that, something that just draws lots of power and you just need a ton of batteries to operate it, integrated systems are basically your only option. You can kind of build a custom portable power station, but I think that defeats the purpose for most people. So there are a number of drawbacks as well to integrated systems. So the biggest drawback is that it's costly and time consuming and oftentimes labor intensive to install these types of systems. If you're doing an entire van build from scratch and you need to build up walls anyways, it may not be that big of a deal, but if you are doing a no-build type of build, or if you are in like a school bus that already has interior walls, or a conversion van that already has interior walls, and you don't really want to cut those open, things can get a lot more difficult fairly quickly. Also, some other drawbacks to integrated systems is because they do tend to be larger, they also tend to be a lot more expensive. They don't have to be more expensive. You have similar size systems either way, and if you're really budgeting carefully, the integrated system can come out a little bit cheaper. The difference I don't think is actually as big as you might expect. Some of the other potential problems with integrated systems is that they tend to be a little bit more finicky. You have to make sure that all the components are really well matched, and even then sometimes things just don't work together like you think they should. And so there is that risk that things are just going to sort of not work quite right like they're supposed to. Also, a lot of times if something breaks in the system, it'll take down your entire electrical system. So if something happens to your battery or the inverters or something like that, your entire electrical system is now down and you don't have lights, refrigeration, no power for your computer, nothing. Sometimes that's not always true. So if you have a well-designed system, something like your inverter going out won't necessarily take out all your lights, but it's still going to be a lot more difficult to replace, and accidents like that are actually much more likely to happen. The entire system is not generally going to be under warranty unless you had it professionally installed, which, let's face it, most of us van life people don't. So the alternative to integrated systems is to go with a more modular approach. So that's what I've done with my build. There is actually an integrated 120-volt system in the van, and I do use that periodically when it's running off the generator, but anymore I don't actually use the generator that much unless I really need a lot of power. So my refrigerator just runs off my little Rock Pals unit here, and It's just a 250 watt inverter. I think it's actually a 240 amp hour battery. This particular unit isn't necessarily the best unit. It was an old model when I bought it, and they were basically just trying to clear out their inventory. So even when I bought it, it was already getting kind of outdated. But it works just fine for my application. There's really only a couple of things I actually use that battery for. I can use it to recharge my devices, and so I have an iPad and an iPhone. Both of those use very little power. I also have a solar panel with USB ports that will just charge those devices. So I don't necessarily even need to charge it using my power station all that often. Also, when I'm driving, I just recharge my phone and iPad that way. The only thing that's continuously plugged into my power station is my 12-volt refrigerator. So most people that are doing van life, they don't necessarily have installed refrigeration like a lot of RVs do. It's usually a more portable unit, which is what I'm using. That particular unit doesn't use a ton of power, and it runs directly off of 12 volts. So if I'm driving, I can actually just plug it into the vehicle, and if I'm stationary, I can plug it into my power station. I also have a 120 volt adapter for it that came with it, and when I'm running the generator, I can also plug the refrigerator into my 120 volt system and run it directly off of that. The only reason I use the 120 volt inverter power off of the power station is for my digital piano. That is currently my only device that runs off of 120 volts. Everything else is actually USB powered, including my hair clippers. So that gives me the flexibility of being able to run most of my devices either off the power station, I can run it off the vehicle's battery, I can run it through solar power, or I can plug everything into the generator fairly easily. My lights are not integrated. I used to have LED strip lighting on the ceiling, and I found that, at least in this particular build, I didn't really have a great place to run the wiring for it. So I decided to go a different direction and use these under cabinet LED lights. I have 4 of them, and between the 4 of them, they can light up the whole van quite easily. And they all are battery powered. They run about 7 to 8 hours each on battery power, and they are USB rechargeable. And it only takes, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes for them to recharge, something like that. And so for me, that system works really well. And I have continuous light. I can recharge those off of a large variety of power sources, and they keep everything lit just as well as I need it to. So there are some downsides to the system. Of course, it's not quite as seamless. You do have to think about what you're doing a little bit more. For me, that's completely worth it. But for some people, you know, that can be a deal breaker. They don't want to have to think about their power at all. I also tend to use a lot less power. I have a 100-watt solar panel on the roof, and that is more than enough to power everything I need to do. Another downside of using a more modular approach is you do really have to pay attention to how much power you're using. I think this is where a lot of people kind of stumble when it comes to their power systems in their vans, is they just want to have everything that they had in their house and not think about how much power they're actually using. So the way to avoid that is anytime you buy a new device, check the power requirements, make sure that it's a low power device and it's not going to use up tons of power. So those are my thoughts on the 2 types of electrical systems that you commonly see in vans. Obviously, I tend to prefer the more modular approach. Also, these systems do need to be upgraded periodically, and upgrading a more modular system is super easy. Any part of it that starts getting behind or starts breaking, you can always just replace that one thing. You don't have to worry about the rest of the system. For that reason, and just the ease of use, the flexibility it gives you, for me, I find that these modular systems work really well. For other people, if you're doing a lot of intense computer work and you just need tons of power, a more integrated system with lots of solar panels on the roof is probably going to be your best bet. So that's it for me today. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.